Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Blackhawks, in which the Sharks lost 5-4. So their first loss to the Blackhawks this season. While the Sharks did manage to score a decent amount of goals, as they did in the first two games, they scored 7 goals in the first ones, 5 goals in the second one, now 4 goals in this one. This time it was not enough, as the Blackhawks scored 5 of their own, and the Sharks extended their losing streak to 7 games in a row. And once again, like that loss against the Red Wings, the Sharks squander another great opportunity, with the Calgary Flames having lost, I believe, yesterday to the Dallas Stars, as well as the Golden Knights having lost yesterday to the Colorado Avalanche. The Sharks with an opportunity to solidify second place or even make a run for first place, and it doesn't end up happening here with this loss to the Blackhawks, and I'll probably say that they seem pretty much locked in for second, although maybe if the losing continues, they could even drop to third, depending on how Vegas recovers from their current 3-game losing streak. First period starts out, and again, you think that the Sharks would come out with a good performance, but for some reason, they seem like that's not ever going to be the case, as the Blackhawks don't just pile on 1, don't just pile on 2, but pile on 3 unanswered goals in the first 10 minutes of the game, including a 5-on-3 goal from Alex DeBrincat, and so it's a 3-0 lead that the Sharks are... a 3-0 hole that the Sharks are facing at the moment. And luckily for them, they are against one of the worst defensive teams in the league, the Blackhawks. So the Sharks, with the help of Redill, who finally ended the unanswered goals for the Blackhawks, and then in the second period of strong push fight from them, with Nyquist's 20th that made it 3-2 before it was DeBrincat who made it 4-2, and then Hertl and Meyer to tie it up 4-4 before Kunitz made it 5-4 Blackhawks. But going into the third period, I still had confidence. As I said, the Blackhawks were not a very good defensive team. They were giving up some opportunities for the Sharks, but then somehow, in a weird turn of events here in this third period, one of the stranger third periods I saw, the Sharks could not manage to solve the Blackhawks' defensive unit. And it's not that they couldn't solve Crawford. They couldn't even get many chances on Crawford in that third period. It's like if you couldn't solve a 2+2 equation. That's how poor the defense has been for the Blackhawks this season, and yet the Sharks just couldn't do anything to them. It was like night and day from the second and third period. So the Blackhawks were the team with the majority of the chances in the third period. Jones kept it a 1-goal game in that third period. The Sharks could not get anything more, except for maybe a couple good chances with the goalie pulled, and then they lost. So first thing to talk about, I will do Joachim Ryan, because normally I'm talking about the goalie first, but I'll save Martin Jones for the end because it might be a bit longer. But Joachim Ryan, another very bad game from him. I did say he was a train wreck in the game against the Red Wings. Maybe I'll upgrade that to just being very bad, which is slightly better than a train wreck, but still not good at all. DeBoer decided to try and hide his deficiencies of this defensive unit at the moment on that third pairing by placing Ryan and Heed together. But as the Sharks have learned in the past, for instance, the 2016 Stanley Cup Finals, even when you have that rough third pairing with, at the time, it was Dylan and Polak, tonight it was Ryan and Heed, that third pairing does still have to play at least a few minutes a night. And Ryan and Heed, when they were on the ice, were just a complete disaster. Eventually, I believe by the time the second period rolled around, the Sharks had gone back to Heed, Vlasic, Ryan, Burns, although Ryan didn't get too many more shifts in that game, but I believe only played about 10 minutes. So at the moment, the Sharks are just crossing their fingers. Erik Karlsson can come back sooner rather than later. Ryan was given an opportunity because he's the best option here for the Sharks, and he's going to remain the best option here for the Sharks because the Sharks aren't going to bring up some sort of AHL defenseman to take his spot. But Ryan has not done anything to prove to DeBoer that he's even a useful defenseman still. And honestly enough, this being a contract year, although he is an RFA, I'm not sure if he's even done enough for Doug Wilson to want to re-sign him. So maybe he trades him at the draft or something. Maybe he just decides to release him. I don't know what the case here is going to be with Joachim Ryan, but he has just not been good enough in the majority of the games he has played since Schmek's injury. Of course, Ryan being in the lineup now, is the team is 0-6-1 during this stretch. Next, I will talk about Gustav Nyquist, who has actually been pretty good for the Sharks during this losing streak. One of the better Sharks forwards, although that's not really saying much. He had a pretty solid game here for himself, a goal and an assist. Also drew a penalty by getting knocked down to the ice and having like his chin bounce off the ice. Came back on that very same power play to score a goal before he headed to the dressing room. So that was, I guess, pretty Certainly, I guess you could say a very aggressive move from Gustav Nyquist, I guess would be the word. But other players who I thought had pretty good games, I thought Thornton, LeBanc, I thought Hurdle did some nice things in this one. I thought a decent amount of these forwards actually had solid offensive games. I thought Donskoy, surprisingly enough, was actually pretty decent. He ended up getting promoted from the fourth line to the second line in favor of Lukáš Radil, I believe, in the third period, and he looked okay there. Nothing special, but still, I guess it was good news moving forward, and Nyquist starting to fit in well with the Sharks. Finally, I will talk about Martin Jones, of course, a huge contentious topic in the Sharks fan base at the moment, and I think probably one of the most contentious topics I have seen among Sharks fans just in a very, very long time. There are some people who are on the side that Jones is the worst starter in the league and that the Sharks are not going to go anywhere in the playoffs, and the Sharks are very unlucky to have him signed up for multiple years. And on the other side, there are people saying that Jones is going to come back in the playoffs, that Jones has always been great in the playoffs, that he's still a fantastic starter. You know, the Sharks are lucky to have him signed, everything like that. And it really seems to be this huge issue. Now, I'm not going to say that this game is some sort of, representative of how his entire season has gone. So whether it was a good game or whether it was a bad game doesn't really change how the previous bunch of games have actually gone. But tonight, I don't think Jones was actually too bad. Of course, 5 goals let in by the goaltender is never a good sign, but still, I would say the first goal from DeBrincat, it was on a 5-on-3. I don't think Jones has much of a chance on that. The Murphy goal deflects off of Tim Heed's skate and goes top corner. Don't think he had much of a chance on that. The Jonathan Toews one, that one deflects in front as well, goes right to Toews all alone. I don't think he had much of a fault on that. The 5th goal by Kunitz, tipped right in front. Don't think he had much of a chance on that. Only the second DeBrincat one, I would say, you could potentially argue, although this was a nice one-timer and a good shot from DeBrincat. But you could definitely argue it, and you can't really say Jones had a great game either, letting in 5 goals, but he made some decent saves in the third period. He had a couple of okay saves, and in general, I thought the Blackhawks probably even had more scoring chances than the Sharks in this one because of the great start they had, and in the third period, they piled it on a few times, so it wasn't a terrible game for Martin Jones. It also wasn't a great game, but I don't think it's really fair to start just looking at the box score, seeing like 3-4 goals scored by the other team and thinking, oh, Jones is washed up and terrible and everything like that, because you do still have to evaluate it goal by goal. And so you can say as a whole over the season, Jones hasn't been good enough, and that's certainly true. But if you're just looking at this specific game here against the Chicago Blackhawks, I don't think Jones really was that bad, but that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Saturday. They will face off against the Vegas Golden Knights. The Golden Knights do actually play tomorrow, so that will be a second half of a back-to-back for them. We'll see if they come in on a 4-game losing streak or if they will break that against the Wild. And the Sharks will have an opportunity, and a huge opportunity, honestly enough, to try and break their 7-game losing streak against a team like the Golden Knights. It would be a massive confidence booster, and I really think it would help them moving into the playoffs if they can beat the Golden Knights, especially after a 7-game losing streak. However, if they do lose, they then have a game against the Calgary Flames the next night. That's also a potential loss. They could end up with a 9-game losing streak by the end of this weekend. So these 2 games are extremely important, not just for the standings wise, because obviously the Sharks are trying to maintain second at the very least, but also, you know, confidence and morale wise. Yeah, there's still going to be 3 games left, and you know, the Sharks could in theory rattle off 3 wins if they lose, even if they lose the next 2, and still be okay going into the playoffs. But you're playing the Golden Knights in the first round, most likely. You're probably playing the Flames in the second round. These last 2 games are huge statement games, and you want to be able to turn this around as fast as possible if you're the San Jose Sharks. Class dismissed.